Hey everybody, here I am again, Sue Belka from the Treehouse. Video number 4. Remember last week we were talking about the continuum from masculine to feminine energy and where we live in our core heart. So where we live on this scale of masculine to feminine. And I'm hoping that you've done your homework because what I'd like for you to start looking into now is how you got where you are and how maybe you've hidden yourself from yourself for a long time. So I'll talk a little bit about that today and how that all works. So I have a little drawing here. I'm going to turn my camera so that you can see it. And here in the center is our core heart, that core heart that we came here to be when we were first born, before all of the stuff started happening to us in our lives. And that core heart is either masculine or feminine. That's what we talked about last week. So I assume that some of you may have found out that your core heart, based on what you enjoyed as a child before all the conditioning came in, is more feminine than you thought it was. I'm hoping that you came up with that because now we'll explain how that got covered up. So here you are, your little tiny baby. You showed up here, let's just say you showed up here with a feminine core heart. Your brain chemistry is geared towards seeing the world through that filter from the feminine perspective, brain chemistry, the hormones that you were given at birth. And then something happened. You know, I'll just use my life as an example. Okay, we'll talk about it from my perspective. So here I am, little Susan, and I'm seeing this magical world that I showed up in, and I'm trying to understand how to maneuver in this world. And then, let's see, let's say I'm going along just fine, kind of figuring it all out, and I get old enough that my dad wanted to start hanging out with my brother and I. And so he took us fishing. I think I've talked about this in the past. He'd take us fishing. That was my dad's favorite thing to do. And finally, Mark and I got old enough that he could take us along. And so I got the idea in my head that in order for me to be okay with the man in my life, my dad, I have to put this little masculine shell around me. It's false masculine, but I realized that in order to be in my father's presence, I needed to do what he loved to do. Made sense to me at the time. Well, then, school time started coming around, and I'm still kind of trying to figure all this out. And I get into school where there are other little girls. Well, I'd only had my brother to play with. And now all of a sudden there are these other little girls. And I wanted to make connections with them because the feminine is all about relationships, right? So I go into kindergarten and they're all playing house and grocery store and all sorts of things. And so I put on this false feminine shell because I want to connect with them. It isn't who I am in my core, but I look out there at the outside world and I see, oh, that's how little girls play with each other. Very cool. I'm going to do that. So I have a false masculine shell over, a false feminine shell over a false masculine shell over my authentic heart. Well, then I get a little farther into school and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it until I was 40 years old that I have a reading disability. And the kids started to kind of tease me when I started to read because I didn't read very well. And so I put this protective masculine shell over my little feminine heart that was deeply hurt. But I put on that masculine, doesn't bother me sort of shell over the false feminine shell, over the false masculine shell, over my core feminine heart, right? Then, and this is completely abbreviated. There were all sorts of things that were happening in between time. But let's skip forward to junior high. So I'm walking around now with this kind of tough exterior about you're not going to get to me because I'm not a good reader, and covered up a lot of things in the midst of that as well. And then I get into junior high school and I start noticing boys. Well, who was getting the boys? But the cheerleaders, the really feminine girls. Not the ones that had a tough exterior shell, but the ones that were putting on their new feminine ways that they're learning as the hormones are changing their bodies. And I'm looking at that exterior world about how do I get what I want, which is attention from boys now all of a sudden. And I see those girls and I start kind of learning the ways of the feminine. I put a false feminine shell over all those other shells over my feminine heart. Right? Can you see how this is going? And then getting into actually dating boys, mostly after high school. I still couldn't figure it out through high school. Who could figure out anything through high school? But once I got into the world of men, I thought, wow, okay, so I need to do what I learned as a little child, which is I need to get into the world of men if I'm to be seen seriously by men. And so I learned about cars. I learned about, well, I love hiking and backpacking, but I got really good at the outdoorsy stuff. Not because I loved it, but because I wanted to be seen as a person of interest to men. So I put a false masculine shell over me. You see how it goes back and forth until we get to a place where we don't really know who we are in our core anymore. That's why I had to go back to childhood, back to the time before all of the conditioning set in. And if we can get back to that feminine core, we can actually live authentically who we came here to be. Does that make sense? If you have any questions about this, if you have any concerns about how it applies to your life and your own particular set of circumstances, I gave you mine, but your own particular way of going in and out of these things, then please let me know on my website, and I'll give you that web address again at the end of this video. Because each person has their own way of trying to make sense of the world. And taking that apart and starting to understand these little intricacies and where we get our kinks and our quirks is what is going to lead you to live an authentic life. And I gotta tell you, I know I've stressed this before, but living my life from a place where I don't have to apologize who I am anymore. I can be as emotional as I am and not feel wrong for it. That is huge. That was a huge opening for me. I don't have to protect myself anymore because I know who I am and I know who this girl is. That's the main thing. This girl in the center, who this girl came to be. And this girl came here to share this information with you, and I'm so glad that you are finding this interesting and coming back to see me again week after week. So, again, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you want to start doing this work yourself, please contact me on my website, which is www.suebilka-personalcoach.com. And I look forward to seeing you again in the near future. I have lots and lots of good things to share with you guys. And so each week I'll just come up with some more stuff and we'll have some more fun. And love to play with you in person too. So take care and thank you again for tuning in. I love you much. Bye-bye.